I've played Dragon Age Veilguard for about 6 hours and spoken to the game director and producer. Let's go through more than 12 new things that I learned during my time with the game. Let's go! Let me know what other aspects of Veilguard you're interested in the comments. I'm working on individual breakdowns of the classes, the companions, and more based on my time with the game. Also, thank you to Corinne Busche, the game director, and Jen Cheverie, the producer, for their time. I want to start with the companions and specifically how to level them up and increase your relationship with them, because it's different to previous Dragon Age games. What's different here is that Rook's companions don't level up based on experience. They actually don't gain experience at all. They level up using Rook's bond with that companion. This bond can be increased by using the companion in combat, doing quests for them, and things like that. I asked Corinne about this decision at the preview event, and also just want to note here as well that the interview audio is a little bit choppy. We're in like a massive room with a bunch of people playing the game and lots of noise and stuff, so we've done our best to clean it up, but I just wanted to let you guys know. But here's what Corinne had to say. The audio in this section was particularly bad, so what Corinne had to say was, we wanted relationships to matter, to be relatable. We could have gone with a traditional XP system, and I love those, don't get me wrong. It felt right in this game where you're bringing these companions together to form the Veilguard, and it is about your trust in one another. So when you talk about relationships, it's not necessarily how much they like you, it's how much you know them, how much you know how to work together. It can be platonic or romantic, so it felt like a natural fit that the more you help them working through their arcs and struggles, how you communicate with them naturally leads to that bond that helps you work together as a team. Overall, I thought this works in the game, and it feels more meaningful as you can connect with the companions like on a personal level, and then this like leads to you gaining new like abilities and skills and stuff with them. Each bond level will actually give you 2 skill points to spend in the skill tree, but something to note here is the companion abilities are actually different. Each companion has 5 abilities that range from support abilities like increasing Rook's damage or healing the party, or say like a primer or a detonator damage ability to combo with Rook and the other companion. Using Balara as an example here, her 5 abilities are enfeebling shot, which applies weakened, while doing electricity damage. You've got time slow, which will allow Balara to like slow the time for enemies, so you can just like wail on them for a period of time. Galvanized fear is another electricity damage ability, which allows Balara to create a controlled tear in the veil, concentrating on enemies but sparing allies. This draws enemies towards a point on the battlefield, then deals damage to those that are pulled in close. She also has replenish, which is just a straight up healing ability allowing you to restore your health, and fade bolts, which is an electricity damage ability that detonates the sundered effect, allowing Balara to channel the energy of the fade through her gauntlet to unleash a volley of magical projectiles. During my interview, I did ask about the skill trees and the companions and how they all interact with Rook, and this is what Corinne had to say.
You may have noticed as you completed Balara's arc, or her recruitment mission, after you complete that, all of her abilities are available to you as a player. So that means at a baseline, you're going to be able to do combos between Rook and Balara and your teammates. You're going to have access to her heals, control magic, damaging spells. What that bond is going to do is allow you to invest points into those abilities and curate them more to synergize with your specific build. But if you haven't, say, brought Nev to the field with you, you're still going to have those opportunities. It might just not be as catered specifically to your build.
Maybe the biggest surprise I had out of playing the game was how gear works, as it's quite complex and different to other RPGs. Corinne explained it as the 3 axes of gear.
Basically, there's 3 axes of upgrading or improving your gear in the game. So stumbling upon a piece of treasure or solving an ancient puzzle and getting a really great piece of gear as a reward is so central to the RPG dynamic of what am I going to find behind this door? What am I going to get when I defeat this boss? But we also wanted to make sure the properties were very intentional and worked around the various specializations, the types of builds that we support in the game. We didn't want players to miss out. So the way the fundamental system works is that when you find a piece of gear, it's normally at common rarity. If you would find the same piece of gear in another chest, at another puzzle, or another part of the world, it will actually fuse and upgrade that to the next level of rarity, unlocking more properties. Now, beyond that, if I find something that maybe I can see what properties are going to unlock later, or I've got something that works with my build right now, I'll take that back to the caretaker in the lighthouse. I'll upgrade its stats, I'll put unique enchantments on it, and really customize it to suit my purposes. Really find that triangle of progression on gear to be really satisfying in terms of the overall possibility space and the decision making.
Having the gear you find actually upgrade like the same piece that you already have is a pretty novel concept. I found it quite exciting to open a chest and get like a piece of gear, like upgrade, say something I was wearing from like epic to legendary, or even upgrading like a common piece that I wasn't using and like upgrade its quality and be like, oh, that's cool. Maybe I'll try and use that. On top of that, like you can then take these gear pieces back to the caretaker and increase their level by adding like a +1 or a +2, or even enchanting the gear for additional effects. I think this does come together really nicely, and it is quite unique for a gear system. There will be unique pieces of gear, like we did see that in some of the original trailers, but I didn't come across any of those during my playthrough. One thing to note about the gear system, however, is that gear is locked to either Rook or a specific companion. Now, during my preview video, which I'll link here if you haven't seen, I did expand on my thoughts about the gear system and especially this part of it and how that all kind of works. But essentially the TLDR here is that gear is locked to either Rook or a specific companion, meaning that all the gear you find either like out in the world or buy it from a vendor, wherever you get it from, will only be usable in one specific slot for its specific companion. I asked Corinne about this decision as well.
One of the things that we heard loud and clear from our fans, I'm a big fan of Inquisition. I've played it more times than I can count. But how many times have you gotten a piece of gear for your Inquisitor, and then you play this game of hand-me-down Waterfall, where you spend an hour going, okay, well now I can move that to one of my other companions, and this then moves to Iron Bowl, and so on. So not only is it bespoke and alleviates kind of that friction, it also allowed us to be more intentional with the properties and role of the benefits of the gear as it relates to the companions themselves, affecting their behavior, whether they can revive you or not, what happens when you ask them to attack certain targets. It feels very curated towards each companion.
Yeah. So it also let us be very intentional about how the companions look. They're all very unique. They have their own strong personalities, right? So being able to reflect that in the visual design of the outfits that they're wearing and the armor pieces and everything really helps to like hone in on that personality.
That is such a good point. There's no way Nev is going to go tromping around in the stuff that I wear as Rook. It's just not happening.
Yeah. I won't rehash what I said during my preview video here, but this is something that definitely gives me pause, because there are a lot of like gear slots here, and you're going to definitely be finding a lot of gear for all of your companions and also for Rook. Like, what happens if you find a lot of gear for companions you're not using? You know, I think that there's going to need to actually play the full game to just like see how that balancing works between, you know, finding gear that's actually useful to you and the specific companions you're using, because we already touched on, you know, the bond level, right? You want to be using those same companions to increase that bond. So it'd be interesting to see how that sort of interacts. When completing quests or other activities out in the world, you will occasionally see a little pop-up in the corner that says your faction strength with one of the 6 factions has increased. This actually affects a number of things that I wasn't necessarily aware of during my preview session and did have to ask about. One specific thing I did learn about faction strength is that there won't be gear that scales with the player's level like an Inquisition, but there will be gear that scale with your faction strength. But it does affect other things than that.
A lot of the content in the game is optional, and I almost hesitate to call it side content because it's all narratively rich, handcrafted content. If you choose to support the factions and do some of that optional content for them by increasing their strength, that's going to empower their quartermasters. It's going to present new quests for you. It's going to determine the overall strength of the faction, how they show up to support you in your times of need. So not only might you strengthen them because you have affinity for the characters or you're chasing loot, it might be that you really feel like you're going to need to lean on them later in the game.
It's fellowship. not just with your companions.
Yeah. We do also know that based on your character creation process, when you pick a faction there, your faction strength or reputation will increase faster with the faction that you choose in your backstory. So that faction decision, not only in character creation, but the ones that you bond with throughout the game are seemingly going to be quite important, not only from a story perspective, but also from like a gear loadout and like what sort of build you're going with as well. The removal of Dragon Age Keep is a big talking point and definitely comes into play with thinking about, the decision you may have made during previous games and how they may or may not impact events during Dragon Age The Veilguard. I've seen the full options here regarding what does pull over and what doesn't. At this stage, we're not allowed to talk about these specific options and what they change. However, what I can tell you is that you can customize your Inquisitor from Dragon Age Inquisition only. And while we didn't get to see the outcomes of any of these choices, like in terms of our customization in our play session, no doubt they will have a big effect on the world, especially with how closely the game is tied to Dragon Age Inquisition and the past events with Solas and the Inquisitor. While it doesn't appear we'll be able to romance Solas, both Rook and the Inquisitor's relationship with Solas will play a big part in the game.
I think the hottest topic amongst the dev team is, what's your take on Solas? Did you romance him? Are you a Solavellan? Do you want to punch him in the face? And as you're thinking about importing or recreating your decisions from the past games, I think that's been the biggest source of division amongst the team. I'm in Camp Solavellan. My Inquisitor romanced him.
I am Team Punch. That won't be changing.
In the preview, we were able to have a conversation with Solas directly with several dialogue options that did appear to affect Rook's relationship with Solas. Exactly where this leads in the overall narrative of the story, like we'll have to wait and see, but I am glad that Solas isn't just like a villain where, we're on a mission to defeat him. There is more depth to his character and the relationship between Rook, the hero, and Solas, the villain. They are also expanding on a lot of the lore elements for Solas and the Elven gods and learning about why Solas has made these choices and done these actions throughout the game and Inquisition. My biggest surprise from the preview was how much I really enjoyed the combat system. It mostly relates to the depth of the basic attacks and the dodge and parry with, light and heavy attacks that can be comboed together, but also charged with different animations. You've also got jumping and sprinting attacks as well. It's definitely a lot deeper than the basic attacks from Inquisition where you just hold a single button. I asked Corinne and Jen about this as well.
It's so interesting because Dragon Age reinvents itself game over game. In fact, I think it's one of the greatest challenges, but also one of the biggest opportunities to really push ourselves and explore new territory. Our North Star when it came to approaching combat was we wanted you to feel like you're embodying Rook. You're stepping foot into this world in Rook's shoes, seeing these towering skylines above you or being lost in Arlithan Forest. It was about presence and immersion. So we knew in taking that approach, what that meant is we needed to give you more agency. We needed to put you in control of all your actions. The baseline then is this fluid, real-time combat model. And it's something that is relatively new for BioWare. So we looked at a number of games when it comes to animation canceling, branching, fidelity, overall game feel. It's really been a concerted effort of the gameplay team and drawing from a variety of sources and expertise. We were able to even bring in some of the experts from within EA, from other game teams. Folks from the Star Wars team come in and lend some expertise on that fluidity and how you make that work. It's been wonderful to give that kind of immersive control of your character to the Dragon Age franchise for the first time.
Very cool too. Even pulling from previous Dragon Age games, specifically the weapon swapping from DAO.
Yes,
right?
yeah, absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Before putting my hands on the controller, I was fully in the camp that I wasn't convinced about the combat system, and I totally understand the criticism that a lot of people have about looking at this game's combat system and not sort of understanding how it plays. I absolutely was in that camp, but everyone I talked to at the preview was very positive about the combat and how each class felt different and fun to play, and I was absolutely positive as well based on my time with the game. There's a lot of fluidity and fun in like the animations, and there's a lot of weightiness in the combat and manipulating the physics of enemies. enemies. It wasn't all positive though. There is a lot of UI and big enemies and chaos on screen during combat, and in the group Q&A we did find out that you can disable a lot of the UI elements, such as the damage floating numbers, your health bar, enemy health bars, and that spider sense incoming attack indicator as well. This is really good, as I definitely felt overwhelmed early on by everything happening on screen. It was only an issue in certain encounters like fighting the hordes of Darkspawn, or in smaller and more contained encounters like boss fights. You don't really have that same effect because it's only that one boss you're fighting, and that scenario is a bit more self-contained. But in the larger horde sections against Darkspawn, like in the later chapters, definitely felt some of that overstimulation, I guess is the best way to describe it there, with all the things happening on screen and sometimes the camera angle not landing correctly. But I'm glad that you can customize the UI in that way. We know that Dragon Age Veilguard isn't an open world game, but it's not necessarily a linear game either. I think the best way to describe it is somewhere between Mass Effect 2 and Andromeda. Main quests will follow a relatively linear path with choices that you make around how you tackle certain scenarios, or you could go down A path or B path that will change the outcomes, etc. However, the Crossroads acts as a central hub area that will allow you to travel to all the major areas in the game, while also having its own content and exploration you can do there, as well as unique fights as well. This is explained in detail in the latest exploration blog. From the home base of the lighthouse, you'll be able to access the Crossroads, a meeting place for many Illuvians. This area will serve as the main connection from the lighthouse to the rest of Thedas, as well as lead to a lot of side content. The Caretaker will act as a guide throughout this area, ferrying the party to different islands in the Fade. Additionally, there will be more puzzles to solve in this area and even some extra missions, but we'll leave those shrouded in mystery to discover on your own. I did discover some of these mysteries and get to play around in the Crossroads. I got to travel through this area a couple of times and even fight a boss in this area that unlocked another area that I was specifically trying to go to. However, it was advised to me that bosses like these and these puzzles and other activities will definitely be not necessarily part of the main path, but part of that exploration that you can do throughout the Crossroads, and even in other locations like in some of the cities as well. There'll be a lot of these side activities and things that you can interact with, including bosses to fight, which I'm actually excited to do. I was a little worried when we did find out in interviews that this wasn't an open world game, how linear the path was going to be. It does seem like in missions specifically, you will have a bit more of a linear path with maybe some forks in the road where you can go down one path or the other, which I did actually get to see. But it's outside of those missions, you'll get a bit more of that freedom to explore and do what you like. A little bit like how in Mass Effect 2, you might be on your ship and, be able to explore outside of missions, but then when you choose to go on a mission, you're stuck in that specific linear path for that period of time. A quick one here that we found out at the event, and that did come out in the progression blog, is that the level cap for Dragon Age Veilguard is level 50. I believe in the preview session, the most we got up to was level 35, and at level 20, you actually unlock your specialization for the class in your skill trees, so you can then spec into one of the various lines. Companions will work differently, however, like I touched on earlier. I'm not exactly sure what the max bond level is. We didn't get to see that, but you might be able to do some calculations based on getting 2 skill points per bond level, what the max level is. My guess is probably somewhere around 10, something like that, but we'll have to wait and see. The big question though is, how long is the game? Now, game length is a weird one in RPGs because of how much depth there is in side content, exploration. During our preview, we played up to chapter 5, which was the end of Act 1, and we were specifically advised that there are 3 acts in the game, with Act 1 being the most substantial or the longest one because of the bigger plot elements are sort of shown off there, as well as you unlock all your companions, and it's a big introduction to the game. A developer at the event did say that they recently finished a playthrough that took 100 hours. Wouldn't necessarily take that as gospel, saying the game is going to be 100 hours to complete. We don't know how much of that time was main quest versus side quests, or time spent testing, just playing around with mechanics, but Dragon Age Veilguard is sure going to be a big RPG with lots of content. I'd love to know your thoughts in the comments down below. For Dragon Age The Veilguard and RPGs in general, what do you think is the best length of these sort of games? I am working on a companion breakdown with all the skills, additional info, plus the classes and more that I mentioned earlier. So make sure you subscribe, like the video, do all that good stuff, and let me know what you'd like to know about the game. But thank you for watching this video till the end. Thank you to our members for supporting the channel. My name is NorZZa, and I hope you have a great day.